In this video we'll talk about the brand new Split EQ. Eventide claims that Split EQ is a groundbreaking EQ that offers a fundamentally new approach to corrective and creative audio equalization. And we will compare it with the, in my opinion, current king of EQ plugins, Fabfilter Pro Q3. This will be a bit of an apples and orange comparison, where I will use Pro Q3 to mimic the behavior of Split EQ. And this video will answer the questions you have about the differences and similarities of these two plugins. In a nutshell, that fundamentally new approach of Eventide's Split EQ is that the plugin splits the audio into a transient part and the sustain or tonal part from an audio source. Now this isn't really a new approach. For instance, I just reviewed the Waves Factory Quantum plugin, which splits the audio in the same way. How exactly this split happens is program dependent, so it depends on the audio you use it on. In the basis, the plugin works like a normal parametric EQ. 6 parametric bands with 6 variations of filter types, and you can set the slope. You can see the green and blue markings around the white dot. These are your transient and tonal EQ nodes. Green is for the transients and blue for the tonal parts. The white dot changes the setting for both, and when you drag the little handle you get separate controls. The frequency point stays the same for both, except when you use the high and low pass, then they are independent. This opens up a whole bunch of tonal options which have been discussed in many videos here on YouTube. Like in the excellent video Warren Ewart did on this. But I will show you how powerful Split EQ can be with the next example. I have this snare in a mixing project where there's a lot of cymbal bleed in the snare, which I want to remove and is a pain in the behind. And I found out that with a little extra help I can get a really good result, probably the best result I have had with all methods I tried by doing it like this. I use a low pass on only the tonal part and use a fairly smooth slope. Drag it down to where most cymbals are gone and where there still is some snare body. Let me tweak with the settings here below to get the best result. Now the next step is to use any multiband gate. I use Fabfilter set on 2 for that. Select the right frequency band and dial in the gate. Right now it sounds a bit dull, so I will add another EQ. I will use Split EQ for this and boost the higher mid-range to bring back some of the snares and life. Fine tune, of course. Now to really seal the deal, I'll use the free snare bus plugin to add some snare wires. I'm truly impressed with this result. From here I can without hesitation mix the snare as usual with compression and EQ, which would have been much more difficult than without removing this cymbal bleed. But can you do something like this with Fabfilter Pro Q3? Well, yes actually. You know, transients happen to live usually in the higher frequency spectrum, and with that in mind, on this snare, I can use the dynamic EQ option of Fabfilter Pro Q3. First I need a frequency band to dip the cymbals. And then I will add another EQ at the snare attack transient frequency, and with dynamic EQ I will bring out the loud attack and will adjust the entire band. Fabfilter Pro Q3 sounds like this before and after. And this is Split EQ. Similar results. Now, before everybody starts writing comments on how wrong this is, let me work on this acoustic guitar track. With Split EQ, it's very easy to change the performance from attacky to more rounded and airy types of acoustic guitar sound. With Pro Q3 it's nearly impossible to achieve that. So you can hear how quickly Split EQ can dial in this type of sound. Now let's go back to the split transient settings of Split EQ. If you use extreme settings with the split transient controls, you can get an aliasing type of effect. So it's really important to dial this in properly and not have extreme short settings with material like this. If you use Split EQ on the full mix, it has this handy feature to monitor the transients, where you can quickly decide where you need to tame the transients or increase the tonality. Taming transients is done simply by lowering the attacks at the higher frequencies. And it sounds really good and natural. I cannot get this result with Fabfilter Pro Q3. Both plugins have stereo width tools, and for me, Fabfilter Pro Q3 is way more useful in this regard. You can easily select left, right, stereo, mid or side bands and widen the stereo width by simply increasing the sides of a frequency. Split EQ can do widening as well, separately for those transients and tonality, and also pan frequencies. This is something you need to be careful with, since this can easily throw your audio out of whack. Split EQ has a latency of 74.8 milliseconds, so this is a plugin which you basically use in mix and master and is unsuitable during tracking and for recording. Pro Q3 will do zero latency and has linear phase modes as well, which can increase latency a lot. Is Split EQ the new EQ king and better than Pro EQ3? Fabfilter Pro Q3 is the benchmark, the king of the hill, the plugin all others are judged by. I think you can probably agree with that. If you're just starting out and are looking for an EQ plugin, you might want to give Split EQ a pass, because the concept is different than any other EQ out there. It's easy to mess things up. Pro Q3 is easier to start with and will have more options when you need them. But they really are two different tools, and I think that Split EQ and Pro Q3 actually complement each other really well. Pro Q3 is for analytical, precise EQing with the dynamics control EQ matching and flexibility. Split EQ is for the out-of-the-box transients versus tonality EQing, which will give you flexibility on a whole different area which Pro Q3 cannot do. Pro Q3 may be king, Split EQ will be queen, or the other way around. But if you are looking for a very intuitive way of using EQ, from very global and quick to gradually more in-depth and complex, watch the video I did on Sonos Claro, also an excellent EQ plugin. It's displayed on screen and linked in the description below.